morning, good afternoon, good evening. I did have to look over there, make sure I did not have the microphone on mute today, which I do not, thank God. That's how you know it's going to be a good stream, is when you don't mess up the microphone. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the May 30th, 2024 episode of the Security Data Operations stream. We made it 2 weeks in a row. Like kind of 2 weeks in a row. We did two streams. We did it 2 weeks ago. Either way, I'm super happy to be excited, as always, to join you, as well as my co-host, Mr. Jonathan Rao. I had to find the button on my stream deck. John, how you doing today, buddy?
I am doing good, man. Got a lot of good things going. How are you, bro?
I'm good. It's again, like, it's always a good day when you turn on the stream and you remember not to mute the mic. I do want to keep our intros short today. Oh, actually, they're saying, oh, look at that. We've overcorrected on your volume, John. Now they're saying,
great.
That's on me, guys. That's on me. Let's fix that. Let's bring you back down. Okay.
La 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 la.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Like that's a stream no. We don't sing on stream. Somebody's gonna clip that and it'll be all over the internet, and then you're gonna be doomed.
No, it's gonna be a meme.
It is gonna be a meme.
I feel when somebody talks about cloud security.
Shh. Not yet. Save it, John. Save it. I know, you got to get it out. You're just dying to go. Hey, hold on. We're going to keep intro short today. We do got a lot to cover, and we kind of did the intro last week, but I do have some housekeeping items. I always touch on these housekeeping items because I think it's super important for all of our viewers to understand. We are streaming live across LinkedIn, Twitter/X. We got tons of viewers on Twitter/X. Glad to see everybody hanging out over on Twitter. You can add us over on Twitter, and we will get your questions over on Twitter if you're over there. Twitch, YouTube, LinkedIn. We tried to do Instagram, but we had some video issues on Instagram, so we'll continue to work on that. For everybody who is listening across all the platforms, thank you so very much for tuning in across all the platforms. We really do truly appreciate it. We do have moderators in chat on all the platforms, and moderators are here to keep chat free of racist, sexist, misogynistic, just general toxic behavior. The only toxicity that hopefully you'll see is John and I kind of being toxic to each other and probably to the industry as a whole. But that's a different story altogether. But moderators are here to keep chat, John, this is your favorite saying, a safe space for everybody to share their cybersecurity ideas on whatever John and I happen to talk about freely and openly. They're not here to stifle chat. We're definitely very freedom of speech, share your thoughts and everything openly. We do believe in civil discourse. Do chat with your fellow practitioners across whatever platform you happen to be in. We do truly appreciate it. If you do have a problem with moderation, please reach out to a moderator in Discord. You can kind of see Amoeba's got like this green little sword next to his name. He is a moderator, and you can spam him on Discord, and this is a fantastic opportunity to hit that exclamation point Discord to get that. Second thing, John, and I know this is your favorite part, we highly encourage questions throughout the stream. Absolutely. We love questions. John may seem scary. I promise you, he's really not. He's a cuddly bear. He's a cuddly bear. Look at him. Everybody drop little bears in chat for John. I promise you, he's a little cuddly bear.
Oh, thank you.
Anyway,
yes.
If you hear John or I say something that makes you think of a question, the best time to ask it is right then when you think about it. We don't want you to forget it. I promise you the moderators are grabbing questions. They're grabbing comments that you say in chat, and they'll push one on screen at the magic button, just kind of like that, and you'll see it pop up on screen. And John and I can look at that and be like, aw, somebody's a fan. We love it. We're glad to see it. We'll answer the question. We'll do our absolute best to answer them. You don't have to wait for a Q&A at the end. As a matter of fact, we prefer you not to wait for the Q&A at the end. That way we can answer your questions in line. We do truly
and
leave
early.
And no leaving. No. I got you here. I got you here for an hour. You're mine. You're mine for an hour. You ain't going nowhere. Speaking of moderation,
makes me feel
John.
warm and fuzzy.
Speaking of moderation, John. You and I got to talk, dude. You and I got to talk. I think you set a new record last stream 2 weeks ago.
That was our only stream.
Yeah. It wasn't for viewer count, which I wish it was. I think. Do you have any guess what the record was that you set for me last week?
Well, first off, only 12 people watched it, so
that's not entirely true, John. Marketing may have told you that so that you didn't feel like any imposter syndrome showing up on stream, but that's definitely not how many people were watching.
All 5 of you.
No,
us too.
You set a record for the fastest time I've ever had a producer message me and tell me that we've got to take content offline because of something you said.
How much things did they clip out? They hit me with that Stalin, bro. They erased me. I got information warfare. How many erasures did I go through on that one? 5 or 6?
I have no idea. I was not involved in that. I just know that I got the call that was like, can you take the video down now? So for those of for those of you who reached out to me after the fact and were like, hey, Neal, where's the VOD at? I'll have one of the marketing guys give me the link for the VOD and you can go do it. There had to be some post education, which is why it's important to tune in live.
Yes, come for the pre-Gulag content.
That's right.
Stay for the memes.
That's right. In all seriousness, listen, and John and I are very adamant about this, and so I'm putting on my most serious face possible. John, put on your mean face, your serious face, right? You may see the Query logo in the graphics. John and I are super grateful that Query, has agreed to let us take some time out of our very busy days to chat with you all. I want to remind you, and John wants to remind you, and we're very, very adamant about this. John and I are lockstep on this. This is not a show to sell you on anything Query. As a matter of fact, you'll rarely hear us talk about Query whatsoever. John and I have a shit ton of experience, a crazy amount of experience. We're very vocal. We love to talk shit to about the industry that we're in because we find it very cynical and there's a lot to talk about. We want you all to benefit from that. And so take this time to ask us questions about any of the topics, anything, whether it's something we're talking about or not, and we'll do our absolute best to answer. John, I'm not sure if you want to piggyback on that since you were the one who got censored 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I know. I'm always getting censored for stuff. The impersonation was funny, though. It was kind of a drop of the hat thing. But I don't know. In between my yapping and, well, all I do is yap. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm surprised you even named our employer here, even though they're forcing us to be here. They're in our walls. Marketing, I know you're watching this. I'm coming for you, marketing.
They are watching. They are watching.
Yeah,
everywhere,
and they will be at Reinforce. But no, I mean, it's 100% right. Look, I think too many of these streams, casts, whatever you want to call it, get turned into yapping sessions about selling, or maybe like a psyops way of selling, psychological operations of like, oh, wow, here's a hard problem. Wouldn't it be great if there was a company that could solve this? I'm sure you love that, Neal, watching vendor casts.
Yes, every day. Everybody who's a typical cyber and security viewer knows that is my most favoriteest thing ever. Absolutely.
Yeah, but not the stream.
Right. So anyway, ask your question anytime. We do have a question in chat. I do see that one. I'll get to that one here in a little bit since it is about pen testing. I do want to jump right into John. Because, John, your post yesterday on LinkedIn kind of talking about today's cast kind of started the shit posting early, if that is even possible, right? I know you have extensive thoughts about cloud pen testing, especially since you led teams doing that. Can you kind of talk about what your role was in terms of leading some pen testing, some cloud-centric pen testing teams, and kind of what was involved in that?
For sure. I am sure that one of our one of my former coworkers over there would probably not like that you use the word pen testing, but no, I took over our offensive security team, which I think there's a little bit of a distinction. And really, it wasn't me, Harple Palmer. Harple, wherever you are, bro, even though you're an Oilers fan, love that guy. He kind of led our red team operations and red team targeting ops, really, and kind of one of the reasons that we built our cyber risk graph product over there. And I'll yap about that probably later, because if we start talking about graphs and security, we'll be here forever. But yeah, I don't know. I don't feel that cloud pen testing, cloud security as a whole, all that stuff, that isn't a role. That's well, first off, it's a whole damn department. but really it's more of a mode of operating. I don't think that the cloud outside of, specific SaaS or specific service implementation is really any different than any other environment. I mean, you got virtualization, you got servers. Yeah, they're sitting in some guard dog protected place in Herndon, Virginia somewhere. You can go look on LiveLeak to go see, or not LiveLeak, WikiLeaks. LiveLeak is for.
I was going to say let's not send people to LiveLeak, please. Let's not send people to LiveLeak.
Let's not go there. Even though you go to Telegram now for that sort of stuff, but yeah, no. I mean, I know how you feel about this too, but to me, it's like any X pen testing or X security engineering or X security architecture. I think it's important for like distinction for flavor. If it's like a specific role you're hiring for, like, yeah, I'm probably not going to go and hire the IoT security guy to run my freaking Azure security engineering shop. But at the same token, if I have somebody who is good at penetration testing or is any tier of SOC analyst, I would feel totally comfortable hiring them for a cloud pen testing role. But yeah, I led a red team for a little bit. It was fun. We broke some stuff. We found stuff outbound that was broken. In fact, we found more like outbound partner stuff that was broken than internal, which I guess is a good metric to have, but ideally wouldn't be broken, and especially not at a law firm. But I don't know. What's your take on it?
I mean, here's the thing. I think you hit the nail on something I feel very strongly about too, and I think that's what I want to kind of dive into here in a second. But I want to ask you first, because audiences love stories. Everybody who listens to us loves stories. So I have to ask you, tell me a crazy cloud story. What's the craziest thing you found doing a pen test?
This one isn't too crazy. So at the beginning, right, when I took over the directorship at IHS Markit, which was it was a big company. It was made of IHS and iPrio and Market, Jane's Defense, and technically Carfax as well, right? It was huge. I got hired like right when like the pandemic lockdown started. So I showed up to 33 Water Street or wherever we are in downtown Manhattan by Chelsea Piers. They like pretty much slid my computer across the desk and be like, get out of here. Drove my happy ass back across the bridge in New Jersey where I was living at the time. And not even 48 hours later, they're like, hey, new cloud security guy. You're the cloud guy. You're the security guy, right? I'm like, oh yeah, that's me. They're like, we have a contractor that like took over the super important product account. What do we do? I'm like, you gotta be shitting me. Like I just started here, but man, like everything that I've seen, like just totally wacky on the cloud has, I don't want to say it's like user error. It's not following best practices, or it's completely, novel, or at least when it's novel at a time, right? Everything's novel. Everything's a 0 day until it isn't. Everybody copies it over. But yeah, this was one of a disgruntled employee, the happenstance, like the economic kind of aftershocks from the pandemic necessitated a lot of layoffs, and they laid off, from what I understand, like an entire SRE, site reliability engineering, platform engineering type team. And one of them had the keys to the kingdom, right? There's still like, per root user MFA. I think AWS is either going to change that, or they have changed it already, where you could have kind of one key to rule them all, which is also dangerous. But it was a YubiKey hardware, which is great. That's the best practice, until the person who has the freaking thing is big mad at you. And they took over the accounts, and it's like, what telemetry do we have? Do we have a SIM? Do we have CloudTrail logs going out so we can see what he's doing? Do we have any guard duty events? Guard duty should be spitting out alerting. And it's like, oh, maybe I think we have some of it in this data log lagoon, I think they called it, in Azure Blob. And then we have to decompress it and download it. I'm like, why are you putting AWS in Azure? And, look, I'm not trying to like talk too much smack about like the architecture and central IT team back there. I, loved all the folks that I worked with. I'm sure they did not love me saying no and yapping about a bunch of stuff. But yeah, that was the craziest thing I've seen, just because of the circumstance of it. As far as like, boom, second day, and here's like kind of a boneheaded thing that you always hear about protecting the creds, and then somebody took it over, and luckily they didn't really know what they were doing, and also they told somebody about it. Like they got fired and like texted their buddy who was still there, like, oh, I'm going to go and destroy their cloud environment and try to take a bunch of actions. We saw them in CloudTrail, but SCPs, service control policies, and other resource-based policies in the AWS cloud specifically will block the root user. So the best thing to do is kind of have a canned deny all, or only allow like a weird action, like allow a list account, or allow, I don't know, Sumerian, allow somebody to create a Sumerian scene, which is a VR application service, weird one. Just deploy that to lock them out of it. But ideally, you have some sort of like just-in-time provisioned SSO. But you're the real IR guy here, not me. And you're also the real CISO. I'm not the CISO anymore. It's the craziest thing you've seen on the cloud. It can be public cloud or SaaS.
To be quite honest with you, like I think you hit the nail on the head. Like it's really around APIs and external access, and I you touched on it a little bit. I want to put some finer points on it, right? And it's back to the basics. I've got an article that I want to talk about with you because I think it kind of hits on some of this, right? It was almost like people forgot how to do cybersecurity 101 when they stood up an instance in AWS or Azure or GCP or whatever the case is, right? Like, oh, hey, cool, we've got this fancy new AWS instance. Let's send me the password 123. And it was like, but on the corporate network, you don't do that. So why would you think it's a good idea to do it in the cloud? And so I think that a lot of my early cloud IR stuff and a lot of my early early work that I did, building red teams and stuff like that for cloud, we're really focused on, cool, let's kind of see some of these default configurations that people were leaving open. Dude, I'm sure you've seen this one before, like when, what was the service that AWS bought? Not Lightspin, no, it was where you could like click a button, like almost freak.
You
What's
mean
that?
Lightsail?
Thank you. Lightsail, where you could click a button and stand up like a WordPress instance. And guess what?
Right, yeah.
All the freaking default WordPress stuff was on there by default.
It still is. I think there's like whole research wings dedicated to stuff like that, where they pull down public AMIs to find sensitive details. They pull down public GitHubs to find AWS creds. But yeah, I mean, you're totally right. It's all about just, I don't want to say it's all about, but I think from my experience, both working at AWS, like as a TAM, having to help like what they called zipline teams at the time, which was like a ProServe special missions unit, if you would, for like cloud IR, working with the IR teams from either customers I directly had under enterprise support or ones that were in my cluster or kind of external, right? Because they had kind of a rotation based sort of like, hey, if you need help. But anyway, all the bullshit, jobs that I've done, right? It's always, kind of weak passwords, shared creds, sharing IAM access keys, putting them somewhere they shouldn't be, leaving, kind of like flat assume roles, and then publishing your account ID, publishing like all the parts of a secret or something dangerous. And then, insecure defaults on a network, right? Which goes back to my earlier thing. And, that one I know that you believe in strongly, that, hey, cloud security is just regular security. And I'm sure somebody will correct me, like, it's InfoSec, it's cybersecurity. I don't know. It's all fake. It pays the bills. That's what it is. It pays the bills. It gives me money. And to quote my favorite MMA fighter, Manny Moicano needs money. And so do I, because my tastes are more expensive than his.
I was gonna say, I mean, like when I don't think chat understands, like when John talks about his taste being more expensive, John wants a tank. Like you saw my EOD post on LinkedIn. I'm not joking. John wants a tank. Yes,
I do want a tank. I don't want to turn this into like a whole, I don't know, ITAR sort of thing. But as a U.S. taxpayer, my money goes to making machinery of death. And if I wanted to, like, I don't know, use one, like, hey, government, since I paid for you to build this thing, can I, like, buy it back from you and get triple taxed, essentially? Because I'd also have to get an NFA tax for the gun barrel because it's a destructive device. I can't do that, but I could import a whole T72 with the freaking 14.5 KVP that they have to plasma cut and I don't have to reactivate it. But anyway, I could get that for not a lot of money, but I mean, it's a decent amount of money. It's a little bit harder now, given that there's something going on in Europe. I don't know what it is, but it's causing the tanks to disappear.
So, Chad, if you're listening and you need tank advice, hit that exclamation point guest in chat and get John's LinkedIn and reach out to John for how to get a tank.
Yeah. On the real, I forget what the forum is called. I think it's Steel Soldiers. You know, remember back when people used to make internet forums before Twitter and all this stuff?
Yeah.
There is a process that you have to work with Department of Agriculture, ATF or BATFE, whatever they want to call themselves nowadays, as well as I think Department of Treasury for ITAR. But there's a bunch of forums when it comes to like bringing in foreign war material into the country. It's really the freight that's expensive because, tank kind of heavy, ocean kind of big, and people have a really bad habit of crashing tankers into things they shouldn't, like bridges and canals. It's weird. I wonder why that happens.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Pivoting back over to pen testing.
Marketing is like, stop him! Stop him!
Mods, make a note that we need to spend some time doing a mute button for John, or at least like a stream delay or something. But yeah, like I do listen. I want to let me hit on the article because I think that the article is important for context to what John and I are saying, right? There's a recent report, John. I don't know if I'm sure you pay attention to the news just as well as I do, right? Dropbox got popped. I mean, as if that's news. Like there's like 50 of those that happen in a day, right? But there was a vulnerability that was exposed in their e-signature platform this month where hackers were able to obtain usernames, email addresses. They claimed to have obtained hash passwords, authentication credentials. But some of the key ones were API keys, OAuth tokens, MFA tokens. But allegedly, it came from compromising a service account in the back-end infrastructure of Dropbox, specifically what John and I are just talking about, some service accounts, right? And so I have to put a really, really fine point on this, John. When we see people in our industry say you have to be a cloud pen tester, would somebody who had a cloud pen testing background next to their name been able to have identified this versus a regular, normal penetration tester?
I hope so. With the people with the fancy titles, you know how it be sometimes. But no, I mean, a regular pen testing firm, I don't care who you engage with or if it's just somebody like on a 1099 that you're getting, or if you have an internal pen testing team, if your organization is that big that it actually necessitates you have one, maybe you're building threat models, or maybe you just need to check a box to cash the check that your mouth is writing when it comes to like controls. Like, oh yeah, we totally actively pen test everything on our SOC 2 report, right? So yeah, I mean, they would have been able to figure that out, right? It's all about secure defaults. And I keep saying it's all about, but secure defaults is really the name of the game. I mean, that's, if you boil down really any best practice, any cloud well-architected framework, any cloud service security architecture reference guide, a SARG, I guess, or a SARG, whatever you want to call it, a laugh, not a real laugh, even though you should probably use a laugh, right? It's going to talk like those are the first things it's going to talk about, like, IDM, identity, entitlement, access management, need to know, minimum necessary, don't use password, don't use default passwords. In fact, you shouldn't use any password based off. Use modern, kind of like FIDO2 OAuth things. Hardware tokens are great until the person who controls the hardware either gets murked and they're like, give me your freaking YubiKeys, keys, stab them in the face. Which have you had somebody on the streets of San Francisco mug you and ask you for your YubiKeys? No, but I had them poop. Just not during RSA. It's weird. Where do they put mute? Oh, mute. Oh no, I did it again. Marketing, you keep forcing me on here. I'm going to force to say more crazy things. But no, that actually did happen. I had a job. I don't want to say which one it is, but one of the roles that I had taken after I'd gotten there, I came on board with a bunch of other folks to kind of build out this security program version 2, because in the past, they had a lot of lacking controls, right? This is Office days, so the VPNs could be shared passwords, it was shared usernames, sometimes to authenticate to it, the different ways to get into the buildings. It wasn't like a card or FID-based pass-in, and then even if there were in certain locations, you could just turnstile and get into the building and get in the elevator and access different rooms. But somebody had taken some stuff they shouldn't have taken. particularly. I don't know if they're going to try to sell it or whatnot, or if somebody told them to do it. There was actually a whole, state and federal level investigation, and really the comeuppance was like, hey, go implement, hundreds of these freaking tools and whatnot. But yes, I haven't seen, or nobody's come up to me, but there have been not opportunities. There have been occasions that I personally know of where somebody was targeted because of that. And I mean, it happens every day, because what is really cybersecurity than just a subset, superset, I don't know the grammar behind it, of regular old security. And that comes down to, operational security, right? Or personal security that you should be doing every day, right? Use strong passwords, change up your usernames. Don't use your real phone number. Use a freaking burner, or pick up another cell line and register it to your grandma that lives in freaking Idaho.
Okay. We're not escaping from terrorists overseas. Like we don't have to worry about all that.
Hey man, you never know. Like, people follow you to ATMs now. Like, drive-through ATMs are some of the sketchiest things you could do.
They actually really are.
Maybe follow just the secure defaults, and I think those are the most important ones, right? Yeah. This is coming from somebody who wrote a cloud security posture management tool that spits out, hundreds of freaking checks, but most of the checks are like situational. The more important ones, there's like maybe 5 that are like really important.
What are those 5 that are like really important? Like, hey, chat, this is one of those times where, like, in between all the BS that John and I do, like, John's going to drop 5 important checks that I think are important for all you cloud, whether you're a pen tester or a practitioner or a blue teamer. Like, this is something, definitely pay attention to this one. So what are those 5, John?
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you the same question after I'm done. They'll probably overlap, but really, I mean, depending on if you're looking at it from a pen testing, obviously this is stuff that you want to look for that they don't do. But the more important thing, right, is just, it's all around identity. I feel like it's, use MFA, right? Use MFA or some strong authentication. I don't care what it is, but use it especially on the administrators. And ideally, you're kind of force funneled in through an IDP. AWS SSO back in the day, and the other SSO platforms for like federation, for using like service provider initiated or identity provider initiated SOC. But now between Okta OAuth, AWS Identity Center, Entra ID, Azure AD, whatever you want to call it, and the built-in directory services, I already said AWS SSO, but Google has one, even though Google really wants you to use Workspace. And I mean, hell, you could even service initiate SSO through Salesforce. You could use Salesforce as your freaking identity.
Isn't that wild?
My God,
isn't that wild that you could do that with Salesforce?
Yes.
God.
Do that with Salesforce, man. You know what else you can do with Salesforce? You can do a lot of things with Salesforce. It's odd. Yeah. But yeah, so that's 2 in 1, right?
Yeah.
Use MFA or other strong authentication. I don't care. I believe the OMB or maybe CISA, who should be disbanded, created a kind of strong authentication, like, hey, there's MFA, but you should use these MFAs. Whatever, whoever made that, I'll have to dig it up. But I think Microsoft in their documentation has like a phishing resistant MFA. Use one of those, right? So not an email, not a password, not something that you could lose control of. Probably not a text message unless you're rotating phones with even none. That could be sketchy. Use SSO if you can, right? I mean, I have for my own sandbox, right, for like Electric Eyes, not back end, but for some of the more public facing assets of Electric Eye, which is the CSPM tool that I write that has that'll generate like the HTML reports and whatnot. I have a Google Workspace business account that I got with some of the domains, so it's like $7. And you could do that for as many users. Set it up to be just in time. So I think that's also important, that whatever, there's going to be a higher level than your IDP. I think a lot of people get focused on like, oh, I'm going to bloodhound the shit out of their directory.
Yeah.
Something is populating that directory. Some person, some team. It's probably an ERP tool, right? An enterprise resource planning tool. Some people call it HRIS, Human Resources Information Systems, Workday, Bamboo, a spreadsheet somewhere, a logbook, right? Somebody's going to be, logging in
and overtask CISO that's doing it all by hand.
Yes. Or CISO/CPO/CIO. How are you doing? So yeah, that would be the third thing, is like making sure that it's coming just in time from upstream, right? So if somebody gets put on a movers, leavers, joiners, they're moving teams, they're joining they're joining the organization. They're on a RIF list. They've been notified or not notified. And this goes in a lot into detections and like insider risk investigation and interdiction teams as well. I'm sure you know about that a lot, coming from healthcare and running SOCs for investigations like this, and then also on the Fed side, and your Fed friends.
I have recanted my Fed status. Thank you very much.
That is very true. But making sure that that's tied in, right, and then having controls around people moving and leaving. Next is like secure defaults, right? So if somebody's, and this is really broadly specific, but have as small of a attack surface, as they call it, as you can, meaning that instead of, you have app servers that, I don't know, have some app, right? Like your, Bumble or something, or Tinder, whatever. And instead of having all those Tinder web apps, freaking accessible from the internet, Tinder.com should be fronted by a CDN, right? Like that's what we mean by attack surface. That if it's connected to databases, cache, streaming services, data warehouses, ODBC drivers, analytics workloads, ML endpoints, that should all be fronted by the minimum amount of network infrastructure that you need to front it, essentially. And then if there's connectivity back to the office using a VPN, I particularly like AWS Client VPN, but that could apply to other things as well. So, a good network footprint, and then also another top 5, which is a bunch of things in one that isn't exactly, easy to do. But, for a software assurance or information assurance, I guess we would call it on the government side, right? Looking at those AMIs, like don't just pick up some of these freaking WordPress AMI, build it securely yourself, hide that thing behind the network. Don't just have network shares and whatnot that you can log into from the internet. You want to make sure that everything that you could define in software securely, sanitize the freaking inputs. Don't allow somebody just to, change like a /2 and then all of a sudden be able to log in. That was the AT&T breach, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Where somebody figured out that they could just swap the number on the salt and then look at somebody else's profile. That person got like hard federal time too, which is the
no, it wasn't
thing.
AT&T. It was T-Mobile. That was T-Mobile, wasn't it?
Oh, T-Mobile?
It was T-Mobile.
I don't know. It was
one of those two. It was one of those two. But yeah, it was like, I remember that because like they tried to responsibly disclose it, but then it ended up backfiring in their face.
Yeah. So I think those are my 5. I know 3 of those are like more process, big picture governance oriented, but at the very least, use SSO, use a phish resistant MFA. But what are yours? Especially, I know I kind of touched on it from a pen testing side, right? Like if you're a pen tester, like the first thing on the engagement, it's like, what are you doing for best practices before you start doing the Bloodhound and the Nmap and all the other shit? So, what's yours?
So I love that you focus on identity, right? And I think identity is a very underrated control. You summed it up well. I'm trying to think if there's something that I could add to the identity conversation, but I definitely, most of the attacks that I've seen that have been successful could almost always come back to a failure of misconfigured identity strategy, right? Whether that's, I can remember one of the first incidents that I worked at Abbott years and years and years ago. I don't mind saying that because this was like 2016, so it's been close to 10 years since it happened. Was an identity sourced attack. They were using ping as an SSO, and I can say that again because they're not using ping anymore. But they were using ping to federate their SSO across a bunch of their applications, and there was a cookie that was persistent that was used to facilitate a good user experience with their federated apps, specifically Exchange Online, right, and things like that. And so, identity, I think, is hands down, especially in the cloud, the most overlooked attack surface issue that exists out there. So I'm glad you hit on that. I agree with the SSO. I obviously agree with the MFA. I think I want to hit on one. And I want your opinion on this one. So there's kind of 2. I'm going to do 2 in this one as well. I think APIs and just general programmatic interfaces, I think are also huge. I also think shared trust between applications and cloud environments, I think are 2 overlooked, issues. I think you probably tangentially relate both of those back over to APIs. Yeah. Or, not APIs, but to identity. And then I think baseline controls, like I think just fundamental cybersecurity hygiene 101, I think gets you every single time, right? Patching your vulnerabilities, monitoring your inbound and outbound traffic, having a WAF or a firewall in place for, again, I like the limited attack surface comment. I think when people hear that, they're like, oh God, I got to do vulnerabilities.
Attack surface.
The attack surface again. But yeah, if you can like reduce the amount of external machines that you've got facing the internet, that will always make an attacker's job a lot easier. But let me dive into the shared trust conversation, because you and I bantered around a threat model. I think it was earlier this week and maybe a little bit into last week, where we talked about if an attacker had, say, two pieces of information that existed between, a company that had infrastructure in the cloud and a vendor, could an attacker use that shared piece of information to gain access to it? And I think we were both on different sides of it. I think I was on the side kind of, similar to the take that you and I may have had in the military, where it was like, hey, you've got two non-sensitive pieces of information that if you put together could represent, a risk or a compromise to the enterprise. And I think you took more of kind of like, the likelihood is so low, I don't see the risk. Do you kind of want to like dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I think, it's not like this is a new thing, right? Like SaaS apps have been around since the public cloud was around. I think, a Cloud Guru or whatever the educational platform was, I forget if Pearson or Pluralsight acquired them. Either way,
Pluralsight, it was a Cloud Guru. Yeah, it was
Pluralsight. Yeah. They would tell you that the cloud was created in like 2006, 2008 with the S3. It wasn't even S3. I think it was SQS or SWF on the AWS side. And I keep referencing AWS because, I used to work there, and that's my strong suit and my favorite cloud. Unfortunately, for better or worse, not unfortunately, I enjoy AWS if you get around the craziness. I liken it to a golden corral, right? There's like beef ribs,
that's not a great analogy, John. I don't know if you've been to a
great analogy.
Have you been to a golden corral lately?
Yeah, well, not lately, but when you're a broke freaking army, like, E4, right, going to like your third freaking duty station, you ain't got no money because you just had to spend it all moving all your, your prized possessions, all your freaking combat shirts, and, Golden Corral is awesome. So it's like there's a bunch of different options where like Google is very, kind of like developer centric, where it's like, I want to stream PubSub. I want messaging PubSub. I want a broker service PubSub. I want a pub sub service, Cloud Functions. But anyway, SaaS has existed there. You mentioned Dropbox, and then also regular box, ubiquitously named, and I believe even Apple iCloud, right, are all S3 underneath. I'm sure it's a lot different now, but at least back in the day, and at least until probably 2018, as far as I know, we're all S3 underneath. So SaaS implies that shared trust of like, I'm trusting you to use these credentials to access this environment, which is why you have things like external ID, adding nonces. That's a kind of a cryptography 101 thing, adding nonces for some secure modes of encryption, right? And why we don't use things like electronic code books, or we use like Caesarean ciphers. But when you take that out of like the mathematical, like basic, encryption is kind of like security. It's not easy, it's not basic, but like, it's like the raw security where it starts to go into the math world. But, it's really kind of a, I want to say indemnification, but it's not, even though there's some indemnity there. But you should, look into that too, right? Indemnifying yourself or indemnifying them. I always forget what it's supposed to be on our legal counsel. Shut up.
This is why we have lawyers, John. Don't even try to dissect it.
Yes. But I can't be a lawyer because they force you to eat a puppy before you graduate.
Oh, it's true. And there goes the marketing guys looking for more stuff.
They're like, gotta strike that one. We were trying to close business with a law firm. Nice going.
No, I think it was more the puppy comment than it was anything else.
Yeah,
I'll tell you. I got a story that I could tell you off stream that'll make you laugh about that. But
yeah, I have one related too.
But shared trust. I think the point that you're trying to make, though, right, is that shared trust has existed forever, and I don't think that people are thinking about that shared trust when they're thinking about either how to attack clouds or even how to defend against them.
Yeah, I think it's from like a pen testing red teaming perspective, it's like, hey, that's an avenue in, right? So it's like, let's say your infrastructure is all good to go, but I could pop a Salesforce credit, or I come in from the reverse. Your dev has a script that they wrote to support the business to pull a specific table out of ServiceNow, out of Salesforce, out of some other main SaaS, and maybe inside of those platforms, there's other bits of information you could piece together to get back to even a higher level platform. Maybe this is coming from a data warehouse and you have a bunch of customer data, right? There's a lot of implicit connectivity, and that brings you back to, or brings us rather back to your API comment. And that's right. I would include that in like the reduction of attack surface, but APIs can get a bit sketch, especially, again, an AWS example, but it could be anywhere, where not only is the application programming interface, where you're able to, that's how applications communicate to each other, whether it's a RESTful or I guess a service orientated, SOA, or if it's using GraphQL, you're submitting information that app could understand, and then it's in turn talking to other things, and those other things that it's talking to, there has to be some sort of shared trust there. Maybe it has access to your Vault environment, to Azure Key Store, to Google, to Google Secret Manager, Google Artifact Registry, Artifactory. It's trusting you to pull down a package, to make a download, to grab a file, accessing a database, accessing a warehouse, accessing a customer relationship management, a CRM tool like a HubSpot. These APIs, right, could essentially, cascade into accessing a bunch of other things, and you're trusting that it's like, hey, this is the point to crack, right? So from like an attacker perspective, yeah, obviously I want to get into that. From a pen testing perspective, from an assurance perspective, a governance perspective, I mean, if you really think about it, a governance team is like a pen tester without a keyboard, essentially, right? Like they're asking these procedural questions.
You hear that, my GRC folks? John just coined you a pen tester. Now you can go out there and you can piss off all of the cyber influencers on LinkedIn and say that you've been called a pen tester because John told you were.
You're welcome. I mean, in a way, I think like the ultimate pen testing business model would have like a really strong privacy person, a really strong governance person, and then obviously a pen tester too. Maybe they're a cloud pen tester, an IoT pen tester or something. I think the only people befitting of that title are somebody who uses like RFID, like, car freaking pen testers, right? They're running around with hack RFs. They're running around with freaking Blade RFs. Blade RF is the way to go because you get 60 megahertz of bandwidth. That's a story for another.
Until the FCC and comes in and cracks down on you for popping up your own.
You're just not allowed to decode, but if you have permiso, you're good to go. And so
I was thinking about that first time that somebody dropped an MC catcher at Black Hat and turned it on for like 3.5 seconds, hoping that the FCC wouldn't come in.
Yeah, no. Well, the police department could do that for no reason. I can't die, right? And
anyway, John.
Dragon OS. If you guys are like interested into like RF pen testing, whether it's for cars, IoT, intercepting things like LoRa, long range, which is on 925, and I believe it's on 833 megahertz. That's used a lot in IoT for communications. That's great to practice with because it's low energy, radio direction finding, radio astronomy. Look at Dragon OS. The guy who makes it, I think we have to find his YouTube, CMX Cutter or something like that. But just look up Dragon OS on YouTube, and he has a bunch of stuff. He also has a lot of ATAC stuff, right? GoTenna Pro, using some ATAC out there. But that's besides the point. But yeah, I mean, APIs, I think, are the single most dangerous thing. And now it sounds like we're an API security freaking company about to talk about SACE.
God. Don't say sassy. Don't say sassy.
Sassy, sachet. Hey.
Well, let me ask you this, because one of the things that I do like about this show that you and I are doing is that you are much more programmatically centric than I am. Like I definitely admit that the extent of my programming is, a bunch of bash scripts and maybe some Python, here and there. But you've got a lot more of that dev and that DevOps experience. What if you had to give like your top 3 kind of like API do's and don'ts for other people who are thinking about programming, or even like, hey, if you're an API pen tester, you want to get into API pen testing, here are the 3 things you should be like looking at. Like, what would you pass on to people?
Well, one, try not to make all of them freaking public, right? Or if you can make it public, right? like, there is a distinction between an internal API, right? And we had a lot of that at AWS where, an action that you take, because surprise, surprise, every cloud platform is built on their own cloud platform, right? They have to dog food it to scale to work. Ooh. But, the first thing is if it's supposed to be internal, if it's like only to orchestrate some sort of automation, maybe it's to age out a record, maybe it's to re-register something, think of when you connect Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, Microsoft Intune, right? Defender for Endpoint is their EDR or XDR, Extended Detection Response Tool, whatever you want to call it. It's an AV agent. And then you have Microsoft Intune, which is an MDM, which is a weird word because it's mobile device management. It should be, and then sometimes it's called MEM, right? Microsoft Endpoint Manager or Mobile Enterprise Management or something, mobility, whatever. You get the point. They're two different tools and you could connect them because Intune is supposed to be where you have your configuration profiles where it's like, hey, you could use this BYOD device, or hey, you have to have these, updates installed, or you have to have this configuration for like your net capture filter. You have to use File Lock or Vault Lock, whatever, the Mac OS one is. I should know that because I have a Mac.
I think it's Key Vault. Key Vault.
Key Vault, yeah. Right. So that's what Intune is. And then you could connect it with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint such that you could bring in coverage data to have within Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Like, hey, this is on our directory. This is registered to this person. They don't have Defender for Endpoint. That either means that your Intune scripts are broken and you suck and I hate you, which was me when I was the CISO at Lightspeed. I never used Intune or any of that stuff outside of like just, I got to go get Defender data. So let's figure out how to use this API, right? So that's an example of an internal API. If it's something that you use for yourself, not for the customer, don't make that thing public. Don't have your documentation out there. Don't have that endpoint be headable, right? Hide that thing behind a WAF. And then the second thing would be, strong security, right? Not just MFA, but, API tokens, or if you have an OAuth endpoint, or especially like if you're sharing, session data, somebody logging in, they're coming in from SSO, encrypt the JWT, have a way to deauth it, have a way to age it out, have a way to track the sessions, just the overall session management of the security is, very important. And then I guess just, safety, right? If you have like, say, a post or a put API, again, to update some record in a database, to make sure that swipe, that conversation you have on your dating app or on LinkedIn or whatever, you shouldn't be having dating conversations on LinkedIn actually, but I'm sure if they added a dating functionality, a bunch of people would use it. Just put it out there, LinkedIn. It was my idea first.
Marketing is making another note.
That one's not that bad. They put games in it. That's the next thing. They put the dumb LLM. They put games.
Oh, God.
And now they're going to put the dating app in it. People already use it as a dating app. It's all over for you.
It's nuts. It's nuts, isn't it? God.
LinkedIn's full of perverts, man. It's also people who are loud about it, too. Go ahead. They're going to cancel this on the stream, but I got to say it. The ones who are very, very loud about like, I would totally never offer mentorship under the guise of, predating on somebody. Oh, who would ever do that? Those are the people who are the predators.
Oh, God. Okay. John, mute.
Not you.
John has strong opinions about LinkedIn.
Anyway, yeah.
This is the best response right there. Sec IT guy. Now I want to take a detection engineer and put them in charge of a dating app.
I mean, that's probably a good way. There's a bunch of been questions about, people asking like how to get in. But I think the most important thing to get in is getting your mind in a way of thinking. So if it's like, if I was in a pen testing engagement for this app, what would I do from the outside? And that's where the bug bounties are too, right? There's a bunch of people who pay their bills and then some just by bug bounties, just going through like, is this input correct? Can I fuzz this, right? Can I submit something? Can I ask it something? This API says it's for posting. Can I try to delete from this API endpoint, right? Is there safety in the methods? Is there safety in input sanitization? Is there safety in just, it's doing what it said it should do? And can your users get themselves into trouble? And that's a whole esoteric AppSec sort of question, and not my strong suit. I've never ran an AppSec team. I don't know a whole lot about, OWASP other than what's OWASP. But if somebody asked me in an interview, like, name the 10 OWASP things, I'd be like, Okay. Clothes lost.
Clothes lost.
I'll get a new job.
I love that. But I mean, listen, Chad. I hope you're taking a bunch away from this. And there have been some questions, John, and I do want to get to them here in our last few minutes, because I have noticed that the mods have been pushing them all to the queue. I hope, chat, you guys have been taken away just kind of like the various amounts of skills that just kind of like come from being exposed to this stuff, having it in your repertoire, being able to practice it, and really you just kind of like move in the direction, I would say, that the industry kind of takes you. And John, I want to kind of like this question. I thought this was a priority question from one of our Twitch viewers, and I thought it was pretty valuable, because I think this is worth mentioning again, right? And the question really is what is the goal of these talks every other week? What should we be looking to extract from this? More knowledge is more better. That sounds like somebody who went to your high school for English. But just curious the actual goal. I think I would answer this, John, by saying like, hey, listen, more knowledge is more better. And from my perspective, I don't like to write. I'm glad ChatGPT is here and I can like stick a bunch of freaking, prompts inside of ChatGPT and have ChatGPT write for me. But I love to speak, right? I love to talk at conferences. I love to talk to people of the community. And so like for me, any opportunity that I get to talk to people about cybersecurity, which is the whole reason why we started Cyber and Security 4 years ago when we started it, I think is a huge plus. I think what adds to the excitement for me, John, and again, don't feel obligated to piggyback on this, because I know that that's a natural human tendency, to get to share the stage with somebody who is as polar opposite of me as John, with different perspectives, different personalities, different skill sets, and to be able to bring that conjoined amount of knowledge to an audience. I think the goal of this is, can we educate you all on doing more cool stuff in your day-to-day? And then the final piece that I'll make, the reason that this is SecDataOps is because I do fundamentally have a belief that we are failing our security operations teams. I've seen it since I've built my first one in 2016, and I've watched it deteriorate over the years. And I think that there is more data. There was more data in 2016. I don't think we've done anything other than to watch that shit, explode through the roof. And I think we are losing the battle with not just the Dropbox breach, but every freaking breach that ever comes up. We are losing the battle hand over fist for how to protect our, protect your data, protect everybody else's data. And I see this as an opportunity to bring the conversation around having a more data-centric approach to security operations. And I wholeheartedly believe in that. John, that's enough rambling for me. I'll flip this one over on you.
Yeah, I mean, so for me personally, when I was kind of getting into this, I've always been an introvert, and I only got into like computers and network and stuff because I used to play a lot of MMOs with my old man, even though he couldn't do it for a long time because he runs his own business. He does contracting construction in New York City. But we used to play an old dead MMO called Ashen's Call, and that's really what got me into like networking and how does this work and why the freak can I connect to this? And then that got me into like computers and learning Linux and C and C++. But the big thing, and I don't even know who told me this, it was probably some teacher somewhere in public school, like the best thing you could do for yourself is find out 3 things that you didn't know about. And hopefully that's the takeaway, right? Where between me yapping and Neal actually having some like elucidating things to say, more, an easier stream of consciousness to follow rather is, if it's like 3 things, or maybe it's just one thing that like, what the heck is an AppSec, or what's a SecDataOps, or what's a DevSecOps, and SecDataOps is a shitpost. I made it. A bunch of people are using it though. Where are my royalties at, guys?
We should do an episode about like what is a shitpost and how a shitpost turns into a following.
I guess. I mean, it's mimetic energy. But yeah, the idea is just to take away something, some term, some technology, something, right? I mean, it's hard in this format when we're just talking to be like, oh, wow, write that down. I better go do that today. Especially when you ask me what are the top 5 things and I named like 4 processes, and all of them are processes even, right? Like turning on MFA, that sounds great when you're at a startup with 17 cats. But what if you're at a company with 33,000 freaking employees of various states, right? Some are 1099, some are corp to corp, some are full-time employees, some are long-term contract to hire. partners, executives, all sorts of different walks of life, right? Or not walks of life, yes, but all of the things take process. I think that's the thing about security is that we want instant gratification as an industry. We just want everything kind of given to us, and I think that could be the show for it. But personally, I don't know. In the past, like at AWS, when I was like full like DevSecOps, right? Like let's put all the freaking detections in the pipeline and let's scan all the things. And you got to transitive own. We got to stop your app from going live. If you ask 2016, John, or 2010, John, who was a junior in freaking high school in 2010, I'm pretty sure.
Oh God,
I forget.
God.
Yeah, I'm kind of young, bro. Anybody could do this shit, right? Like,
yeah.
So that's really what the takeaway is. But I do echo that, right? Every day. That's why I picked up data.
Yeah.
When I was writing blogs about using Sumerian and using early NLP and IP insights and ML models and analytics and your favorite word, Neal, Haversine distance and Euclidean models and analytics. I never went to college, bro. I didn't go to college. I don't have a college degree. I think I maybe took like 5 college courses through like Capella or something once upon a time. And I was like, this is freaking bullshit. Like I'm not learning anything except for Java and MariaDB. Not to put people down with a degree, but I don't know. I think we're kind of past that finally.
Yeah.
But now we need to get past the whole need just for like, I want to know something that'll get me in to pivot, to get me a bunch of money right away.
Yeah.
It's not that. It's all a process. And I hope that the takeaway is that this shit takes time. You could do this from anywhere, any starting point. That's a good thing about this. And I don't know, have some fun, chill out, have a beer and shit.
I think this is one that I want to highlight on because like I think this comment it is important, and I think this is kind of the root of the question that you asked, Doc G, right? Is I'm not as hardcore that data engineering skills need to be crazy adopted by security folks. Like the stuff that John does is effing magic, dude. The stuff that John does in AWS and in GCP is effing magic. I don't think security dudes need to be at that level, but I do think there is a convergence of data that I do think, security folks have stuck their head in the sand about. And I think the goal of this stream is really about bringing that to light and having that conversation.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I want to touch on that. Maybe not the skills, right? I know how, because we talked on this on the first episode, right? And it was my mistake not to ask you, like, how much more you felt about it than I. I'm almost done with my whole crusade of like, security people. I did a couple shit posts like with the dark Kermit, like, now make the freaking security people their PySpark, which is interesting to me, right? I think it's a skill that you could pick up. Look, if you could write a Python script, you could write a freaking PySpark script.
Yeah.
Just run that shit on EMR, send it, right? It'll be expensive. But yeah, I do think that there is, here's another one, that there's a crossover between analysis, right? Data analysis, security analysis, and it all kind of starts at the same point, right? I think the good thing about our compatriots on the data side of the house is they think interoperability first and they think outcomes first, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we need to make a report for this business, for this demographic. I think I used the example in the last stream. How do I work backwards from this with the minimum amount of data necessary, with the minimum amount of touch points necessary? And I think that's naturally also a security thing, right? Like there's a whole concept of data SecOps, right? Like data security, protecting the security in transit and motion and use, right? Polymorphic, whatever. So there's also that. Yeah, maybe you don't need to learn SQL, but I think we're getting to the point that you probably will. Just like a lot of cloud security engineers, AppSec folks, vulnerability folks probably didn't think that they had to learn like Splunk query language, right? And then all of a sudden people are putting everything to Splunk. The natural thing is going to happen now where you're going to have to learn how to use a Power BI tool or maybe learn how to use a notebook. Though, if they do it right, you shouldn't be writing freaking SQL queries against the data warehouse to begin with. But yeah, I don't know. Go learn some SQL. It's fun.
Yeah. This is a good question. I do want, especially since you came from AWS and you've got a pretty good perspective about that mix of these two kind of crossovers. But how many entry-level cybersecurity practitioners do you think are aware that DevSecOps is even a role in the marketplace?
I think a lot more now, right? Like DevSecOps is kind of still, at the not the forefront, but was forming rather in like 2017, maybe a little bit before that, but that was in the whole state management, config management, everything as code. But then it morphed into from more of like a governance top-down function to version control everything to let's just put all the security into the pipeline. So it's almost like a dead meme now, but a lot of people use the roles. And I've never seen it executed particularly well. I think it's now called product security or staff security engineering embedded within a product team. Because the whole like, oh, we just got to teach all the devs how to securely code. It's like, yeah, maybe they should know when to, sanitize queries and use walrus operators or whatever, but they shouldn't be, learning how to build a whole full stack secure application. But DevSecOps is good in a way that cloud security is good, that it's a broad departmental sort of view of the world, right? Where you could slot into different things. I think application security in all its parts, vulnerability management. What else, Neal? Get me honest here. I mean, there's a bunch of parts of DevSecOps.
I mean, I'm slightly cynical on DevSecOps in the sense that, like you, I don't think it's very well defined. I think no. this question here, and kind of like to Sec IT's guy's point, like I think we all thought that there should be some embedded security in DevOps roles and just in engineering, efforts to begin with. And I think we fundamentally have seen that fail, I think is probably the most direct way to put it. Yeah. And I think it is resulted in like DevSecOps should exist, but it doesn't. It's kind of failed in practice. And I think that's why we've now kind of come to back again to your shitpost of SecDataOps, where it's like, hey, like we wanted to get security baked into engineering 2016, 2017, 2018, around that time. You guys failed at doing that. You gave us a bunch of runaround, a bunch of excuses why it wasn't possible, stopping workflows, limiting the ability for engineering to get code to production, just handle it on the pen test and submit a bug report for it afterwards, blah, 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 all the shit that goes along with that. And so now you've got this vast sea of applications and SaaS applications and other applications that have access to data. And I don't even want to talk about the AI, disaster that's happened over the last 12 to 18 months. Right. And now all of a sudden it's like, yeah. And so it's like, now you've got no security in the dev function, no security in the data management function. To your point, they're always focused on the outcomes, and the outcomes don't have anything to do with security whatsoever. And that has basically culminated into exactly the problem that we have now, which is why I think the SecDataOps, while a shitpost, has turned into a very valid movement, probably one of the more impactful movements that I've seen over the last 20 plus years.
Yeah, no, I think, the question, how somebody get into DevSecOps, I think like a prototypical DevSecOps engineer, even though I'd call them a product security engineer, you got to learn kind of all three parts of that acronym, right? That's what it was intended for. It was some development, even though the development side of security is going to be, hey, you got to write CloudFormation and Terraform and SaltStack and Pulumi and Tofu, whatever it is. So pick up a scripting language at the very least, right? Kind of understand the SDLC process. People skills, soft skills, I think are a lot more important, right? Because you're going to need to be explaining to general managers and software dev managers why what they're doing is bad. But also learning the skills, because you're going to have to be, building out freaking, infrastructure as well, infrastructure services, everything's defined as code. The security part of DevSecOps is very AppSec vuln management focused. Are you securely configuring things? Is network security working? Can you define the WAF rules? Are you patching? Are you monitoring if the patch has failed, restarting? And then can you also reconcile that against like, hey, this software is staked to this specific version. It has to use this version of Pandas or this version of freaking PyMySQL or whatever, right? And then the operational part of it, which I think is the one that gets lost in the sauce, is running all these tools. And because of the DevSecOps moment, that's why we got crap like the CNAP and ITDR and NPR. We have all these DR, application-centric tools that say they're app-centric, but they're not. Right? Yeah. They have no context into the team, into the governance, into the processes behind it. So getting into it is really just kind of perfecting all the skills, up and down that stack, and finding this. And I think what you'll find is that you're going to specialize in an area like, oh, I actually really like this application security thing, right?
Yeah.
Or I really like being a vulnerability manager, and then you'll end up getting into that by accident.
Okay. Jon, we ran over, but it was an amazing conversation. As like, I'm not complaining. I think more, your boss and my boss might complain. I think, more than anything else. But hey, parting thoughts for the community, kind of like if they need something to dream about when, between now and the next time they see you and I on camera in 2 weeks, like what do you want to leave them with?
Cloud security hard. Yes. Invest in tanks and ammunition. But no, I mean, think of small problems first, right? Whether it's in data, cloud, AppSec, pen testing. I think just, we're looked on, security folks are looked on or put too much pressure on themselves to have to solve for everything, right? Nearly everything that Neal and I talked about, nearly everything that Neal and I have done in our career have been like big rocks that you got to chip at, right? So focus on the smallest, minimum necessary thing that you could do to affect a good outcome, and my boss, the CISO at IHS Markit, Eric, always framed it as the what, the so what, and the what next. And if you can't clearly articulate that, if you can't write a one-pager about it, then it's probably not worth doing, or you don't understand the problem space enough to actually, be effective in it. And don't put pressure on yourself.
That is incredibly well said. And the folks who are longtime listeners to Cyber and Security have heard me say something very similar. I did not prime Jon for that. That was pure Jon intellect right there. What? So what? Now what? I think with that, Jon, let's get back to work, sir. We'll see you all
in
2 weeks.